check, 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 check.
I think they're turning me on first. Welcome everyone to the Vista Lutheran Church 2022 annual meeting. I know it's in 2023, but we're reviewing last year and looking forward to 2023. As I alluded to in the sermon, and this will be an emphasis for a while, we're part of God's story, and this is our church. So can we say that together? We're part of God's story. This is our church. One more time and really mean it. You can tell I've been doing children's sermons. I apologize. We're part of God's story. This is our church. And that's why we're gathered here today. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for the gift of Vista. We thank you for the gift of all of its leaders, its staff, the church council, our mission leads, our mission teams, and all of our volunteers. We thank you for the prayers that have been raised for this place, for our ministries, for the world beyond us. Guide us, lead us, and we will follow. To you be the glory. Amen.
Hello, I'm Andrew Rather, President of Vista, and I'm going to be calling the meeting to order. And thank you for taking the time out of this Sunday to come and be a part of this meeting. It just gives a brief update of what's been going on in 2022 as far as where we sit today, our progress that's been made, and give a chance to discuss from our leadership perspective on things we've been working on and look forward to be working on in 2023, and give it space to answer any questions that our congregation has around that progress.
Can you all hear him? Okay.
So the first action of item here, thank you, is approval for the agenda that we have today. Do I have a second? Any discussion?
There's one amendment. It's the approval of the 2022 minutes.
There was an amendment of the approval of the 2021 minutes, you said?
It says 2021, but it should be 2022 on the agenda.
On the agenda, it should say the approval of the 2022 minutes and congregational meeting notes. So that was an amendment. With that said, we'll move to approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. We'll read right into governance and operations for Heidi. She'll be giving an update around some of the job descriptions and work that we've been doing related to that.
Do you want to do a greeting to them from you as a church council president, as staff, and leadership? Okay. So this year we forgot to put in that the church council president was speaking, that Pastor Dan and I are speaking just in general at the beginning of the meeting. I know that our church council president, because he saw this agenda and did not see his name there, is probably not ready to say anything unless you want to. But we thank Andrew for being our president. He goes off council this year. He has been an amazing president that has been with us in a lot of transition. He has given his heart and his soul. His family has shared him with us. They are due in late February or early March, and his priorities are moving to a new baby at home, as well as those two little adorable boys. So Andrew, we thank you for everything that you have given us and all that you have shared this past year. And then Dan and I just usually say something, and we both have written reports, but if I have learned anything this year, it's that the most important thing that we have is this community that God gave us. The people that are present, our present moment, and our future moments together. And we have been trying to do programs, and we have been trying to ask questions, and we've been trying to do all kinds of things to energize this place because we are still post-pandemic. But the only thing that really matters is nurturing this community and everyone who is present so that we can do the will of God, so that we can move forward as a congregation. And sometimes we get caught up in all of the other stuff and think that the answer is outside, but it's not. It's right here. It's in all of you that come on Sunday morning. It's all of you that are online. It's all of God's people. And as we re-energize this community, as we come back together, as we learn what community is this year, because we took it for granted before the pandemic. We just had it. And then we learned how fragile it could be. And now we're reclaiming it. And we're not reclaiming it just for Vista. We're reclaiming it for God and for the people of St. Louis Park and for our mission and for everything else. So that's sort of what my report says. I thank God for the leadership that's here, for the leadership that is out in the pews this morning. I can look at absolutely every one of you and know that you have been active in this place before the pandemic and through the pandemic and beyond the pandemic. You are the people of God. And you are much more important than I am. I might be a lead, I might be a shepherd, but you're the people that live in God's world and live out your faith in your neighborhoods and in your lives. And for that, I give thanks. So this year, we will be building community, not to the exclusion of God's world, but because of God's world, so that we, as followers of God, can go out and make a difference. So thank you, and God bless you all.
Well, good morning. A lot of what is in my report is just also thank you. The context of my thank you is a little bit different. As you may remember, way back 2 years ago and change, you called me as pastor on a 3-year term call. That means unlike most pastors who sort of serve until either they are called somewhere else or they retire, that my call terminates in 3 years. So we are in that 3rd year. What I want to do is thank you. When I came on board, the way that the call was structured had some assumptions that maybe the pandemic was going to be, a couple more months. That was not the case. There were some assumptions made, too, about the way the community life would just kind of pop back into gear as we came through COVID. And those assumptions, as we've learned and as all churches have learned, they were assumptions that didn't turn out to be true. But we've done good things together. And so I thank you for allowing me, your pastor, these 2+ years. And I just wanted to say that as often as I can. Thank you. Thank you for the privilege of sharing joyful moments, celebrations as we could do certain things. Every time we get to a sort of a quote-unquote thing that happens every year, I have to stop people and say, I don't have any idea what that is. because we have never done that since I've been here. And I think that in that disruption, there's going to be an opportunity for this church, your church, to continue to look at those things you've taken for granted that you want to re-energize, those things that maybe no longer serve you, as you proclaim the gospel of Christ as a community. So thank you for the opportunity to be your pastor during this time. We don't know what the next few months holds in terms of timelines and anything like that, but I just wanted to say thank you as often and as loudly as I can, and pray that as we move into 2023, as we move further into it, we've already sort of been in it for a month now, that we continue to grow in faith and grow in engagement in the world around us. So thank you, and God's blessings as we go forward.
And I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say that we've been blessed to have you, Dan, and we look forward to the time we do have with you still over these next few months, and all that you've brought into us, as well as you, Heidi, but the youth work that you do, the camp vibes you bring, will forever be a positive memory in my mind. So thank you.
Thank you.
Did we want to discuss governance and operations before we move any further?
Yeah. Okay, so the next section is governance and operations. Last year, we put together a new model for the church council and for ministry teams, and it was all in last year's annual report, and so we dropped that in again so you could see it. This is our new governance model. And we started it after the annual meeting last year with the council began in 2022. And it has been taking a while to be put together. So the council was learning, what it was doing. We were writing new job descriptions for all committees. We were writing council positions. We were writing, about executive positions. If you have questions about any of those positions, those descriptions are in the church office and are accessible for all members. So we did that from February through May. And then in May, the council had its first retreat and was looking at moving forward and started acting on its new job description. We then started building the mission teams. And the mission teams are listed, I don't know which paragraph they're in. The mission teams are faith formation, their worship mission team, their invitation and welcome, their governance, and community partnership and justice, and building and assets. And we've been those teams. Now that's slow going because we were feeling stuck. People weren't showing up to join the mission teams, and invitation welcome started, and worship got engaged and looked at things like how we do the bulletin or how we do worship on Sundays, and we have some changes in our worship format. And that was in conversation with the worship mission team. We were very busy in this time because we had a staff change. And we were supporting the organist position. We were supporting the choral position. And then we were gifted with the gift of Christiana. So we had a lot of other things going on. Last year, at the annual meeting, if you look at page 18, you voted to move forward with the Vandersall collective contract. And that was a formal contract that we went into at the beginning of the year. And then we kind of pushed them out because we were building our governance and we were building our mission teams, and we wanted to put our energy into Vista and us being comfortable with that before we went forward. And then in May, we realized we were stuck. And in June and July, we thought, okay, they're not a good fit for us. At this point, talking about our finances is not as important as talking about our community and where Vista was going as a whole and engaging our membership, although finance is very important, John. And so the council voted in July to end that contract. They also voted to bring bridge builders in at that point and to do the real work with the congregation. So under the Vandersall collective contract on page 18, we had made a deposit, and I'm just letting you know that. We made a deposit. It was non-refundable. It was $5,000. But the Vandersall collective is willing, when we are ready, to come in and give us something for that money in the scope that we need it, but only when we're ready. Even they recognize that after we did some looking at where we were, that was not a good fit for us. But we had changed their schedule so many times, saying we'll start in May, no, we'll start in June, no, we're going to start in August, and then we canceled them. They had left themselves open and not taken clients in that time. So we thank them for letting us out of the contract and for agreeing to honor some part of that contract. The council then in governance initiated the calling tree because the council decided that you were the most important piece of the ministry in this place as we move forward, and then bridge builders came in after that. Any questions on this? It's a lot. Go back over the governance structure, back over the mission teams. All of them are building, and they will lead us into the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. In discussing about Vandersall and the decision around the council and the discussions that we are, very much familiar with, because we're constantly trying to figure out where do we take this, our work forward, how do we engage post-pandemic, where is our congregation at emotionally, how much efforts do we have to bring into helping move this congregation into, how do we act as community again? How do we form? There was a lot of questions that we felt that we didn't have answered at the time, and we thought that, well, we just need to realign some of our financial goals, was where Vandersall was at. Where do we want to put our money at to better align with the work Vista's doing, so that we all feel that we're doing what we value. And we didn't see engagement the way we wanted to. I think a lot of people struggled post-pandemic about what the idea of community was. A lot of relationships had struggled through post-pandemic, just because I feel like, even myself, I didn't reach out to my friends that I had here at Vista during that time. Vista continued in a virtual format, and then relationships struggled. I missed seeing you, Pam, being through Coffee Cafe. I missed all the relationships that I had in that virtual element. And I didn't realize they were struggling at the time, but in retrospect, they suffered. And so bridge builders were brought in to understand in a non-biased format. 2 retired pastors were brought in to reach out and set up interviews with congregational members to discuss, where are you at? What do you want? Let us know why that is. Just because we are interested in your input and value the things you've contributed in this place since then. And the goal of that was to provide that unbiased platform to discuss on where people were at, so that way they can give us feedback as council around what are some of those action items we can take forward to help rebuild those connections that we had and that we fondly remember, as well as addressing issues that we may be overlooking ourselves because we're too in the weeds of things. So that unbiased perspective helped a lot. And the bridge builders, there is a report in here that I, feel free to read on that on page 19. Just some of those recommendations that they gave us. And the first step that we're doing is bringing in what's called a task force, so that way it's not a permanent commitment. We expect about 6 months of work, and we have several members already identified that have offered to put that time into that 6 months to work on those recommendations. Our first meeting will be here in February, and we'll be providing updates to the congregation after we form that first meeting and start working on these recommendations. So, of the about 40 plus people that participated in the interviews of bridge builders, thank you for your time and talking with them. Your input's always valued, and feel free to grab one of the council members' ears if you want further or more intimate updates. And this platform here is, good for raising your hand if you have any questions.
Gail?
So in the sense of what other people participated in the interviews? Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that was the reason why we wanted the pastors to not be involved from Vista before, so that way when we reach out to these people in our congregation to say, why aren't you coming, that they felt that they had a trusted private platform to express those feelings with. I don't know the names of those who participated. We were only given a report, so it was to remain confidential. So I have no idea as to the inputs we did receive, who they came from. So it's hard for me to say as to who, but in the report it does talk about the things that people found strengths in Vista were, there's a strong leadership. There's a lot of God is in this place was, remember, a quote that came to mind. And they also, on the flip side of that, had what were things that you had struggles with work that's been done here, or why don't you want to come back? Reasons for people why they're frustrated with this place or being a member. Art was one of those things that came to mind and was talked about in the recommendations, was seeing histories of two different and wonderful congregations not carrying forward the good histories together, because we both have rich histories, and seeing how they carry forward is an important task of remembering who we were, that we took that recommendation in the report to address some of those feelings that people had around frustrations. And that was just one of them, but the recommendations that they gave us, one of the biggest ones was just forming again as community and having regular meals together. So it's just, the recommendations won't address every reason for frustration, but I think it gave us a good perspective around what commonalities that people were frustrated about. Yes, I can help step up if you'd like. Of course. So the question was related to how are we quantifying our online involvement, and what kind of financial, are we getting any financial contributions or even written feedback? We do see about 30 people online for the live session and about another 30 for the recorded after the fact, just on YouTube. That's not including Facebook, and we don't have a way of quantifying the TV stations as far as how many people watch the stations between St. Louis Park, Edina, and Hopkins. Those are broadcasted on TV as well, and we can't quantify that, unfortunately. But we do see about, just on YouTube alone, 60 people watching that are unique every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, we don't see too many comments on the YouTube. I don't know if anyone else could speak to the Facebook side of things, but one thing that we've just done this past week started was adding in a slide around financial giving. So giving people the opportunity, for those who are online or on TV, there's links for getting to our website, as well as a QR code for those that feel familiar with how to use that, on how to do secure online giving portal. And we also included for those that are aware of any prayer requests, to reach out to the office. We've just included that in the virtual service as well. Yes, Dan?
And just anecdotally, as Pastor Heidi and I call people, we do hear of seniors that aren't able, for transportation reasons, for health reasons, to get here. We do hear of people saying, I'm so glad it's on the TV, or I'm so glad it's on the computer. So again, those are anecdotal things. There's no data metrics I can say, oh yes, 5% of our congregation is I think as we get better at understanding what it means for churches to have a digital presence, and not just a digital product, but a digital community, which is a big topic that you're going to see lots of conferences about in the next 10 years, that we'll have to continue to think about how we engage people and how we create that community, not just that consumption through those portals. That's a great question, and I do know anecdotally from calls the pastors make to people that there are folks watching. We don't know all of them, but there's definitely, it's making an impact. So thank you also to the media people and to Andrew who get that stuff out, because it takes tinkering with the sound, it takes editing, and we appreciate that.
Nice. And maybe one thing that I would ask is, just in small talk, if anyone is aware of other people who are having a hard time reaching the service virtually or in person, just let myself know or one of the pastors, so we can carry that forward and see what we can do to connect people that are looking for that. Yeah. Yeah, I just heard that this morning. I actually am the person who communicates with the St. Louis Park about uploading our TV service. And so I'll be reaching out to them just to understand, because I heard it was just an agenda that was when our service was supposed to be playing was recorded or on the TV and not our actual service. So.
And people do care about that, because I got a call from one of our seniors this morning wondering why we weren't on TV. So.
We did have several interviews, and we did hire someone, I forget her name, but she was with us for less than a week.
A day.
1 day.
She was with us 1 day.
I think she had a lot of strong resume and a lot of things that she was ready to bring us into the modern day of marketing. I know there was some work done, and she just didn't feel like it was a good fit after that initial introduction. So we've done more interviews since then, and we have those scheduled for early February. So there is more work being done there.
And we have rewritten the job description since the first time it went out, to make sure that Sunday morning and people actually attending to the board and being in person is part of the job description. It was not the first time around, and we realize that's a need.
Yeah. Having people helping us with the board. Thank you, Jim.
And Richard?
And Richard, sorry, I blanked on names here. I'm really good at that. But yeah, thank you both and John for stepping up and helping do those recordings. It helps get the production out to many people that aren't in our physical space. And I help with just doing the editing and getting it out to the TV stations, as well as YouTube and Facebook. That was just the summary that I completed with. We haven't moved on from that. I think that's a good point. I feel like the report itself is not going to be changed by anyone in that task force, but if there is enough information in there where we feel it wouldn't be wise of us to just say, here is everything that they told us, and not to say that it's not going to come.
That was their recommendation as well. Their recommendation was that the report went into the weeds and into really deep places and had a lot of personal comments, but that we should discern how to use it and take that to the congregation, not hand out the report. That people would get lost in the weeds in the report. And so that was also their recommendation, not to, that it was meant for leadership, and that leadership was supposed to take it forward or it would go nowhere.
Well, two things. One, we have to remember virtual services is video and audio, so I'll have to try to recap anything said in the pews through a microphone, so that way those watching virtually can hear as well. The cameras are not able to communicate that very well. So I'm sorry, Ed, I'm not able to recap everything you said. So I don't know if there is something you'd want me to make sure it gets relayed back to the virtual service, but just let me know. Yeah, the goal being to communicate back. And I think that leads to the problem that Connie was hinting at was, for full transparency, the report should be available to the congregation at some point. While I don't think it's wise to distribute it without some planning behind it, I think it needs to be distributed at some point in the near future. I think that the task force that does form needs to have an opportunity to take the information earned from that report to put to action what recommendations we are prioritizing, and at least start with that. And I think the task force needs to find a time that's appropriate to release the report, and it does not mean 6 months from now. I think that for full transparency, I think it would be wise to know where we are at. For everyone that cares about this place and wants to know where our struggles are and want to attend to those struggles, I think it would be wise. that would be my recommendation in the task force, is to figure out when we can release that.
Correct. They did not want us to get a report and shelve it. They want us to work on it, which is what we're doing. We're working on this report. We're integrating it into the task forces. The council is aware of it. We'll take it to the mission teams. And yes, it's not a secret. There was nothing in there that was scary, or it was never intended to be a report that is filed. It's intended to be a working, living document that we do something about. So that's why we're going in this direction.
And I think something that would be helpful is to give a brief recap of kind of, I think we as council members and executive team members such as myself get kind of lost in the weeds around, well, I feel in the loop, but even some days I feel lost in these discussions, and I don't have answers to everything. Well, if I'm feeling lost, how much more lost does the congregation feel? And that raises one of the biggest points that we've discussed in our recent meetings is communication. We, as a council, feel that it is vital to every working piece that we do is we need to improve upon our communication, and we need to do it through multiple platforms. How we're taking the Bridge Builders Task Force work, and what action items are taking from that, what progress is being made, communicating it not just in the newsletter, because if I may ask, a show of hands, who reads the newsletter? A good amount. Okay. I myself, as executive council president, feel pretty in the loop of what's going on. I don't read it. That's one avenue that I fail on. But I'd say that there are people we're not reaching through that newsletter. Any other questions related to bridge builders that I can help answer? Right, it's simple. And I think that's the message. Yeah, Connie's point was, just for those on virtual, we don't need to take a lot of time to plan and report and think too hard about these things. A lot of it's very simple. The message is community. And I think we could have figured that out ourselves, but we also wanted to provide a platform to be able to, in an unbiased way, for our congregation to be able to talk with these two retired pastors about where they're at and where they want to see this place go. Thank you, Connie. Dan, would you like to speak on faith formation?
So just briefly, you can find the faith formation report on page 20. Part of the trouble of trying to enter into new things during this time of pandemic and spotty engagement. I don't want to say disengagement. I don't think it's wholly disengaged, but very spotty, sporadic engagement. It's hard to refine volunteers to start doing things. You can see a recap of some of the stuff that was done for faith formation this year, some of the things that were tried. There will be more things tried in these veins in the coming year. Hopefully more book groups, more adult faith formation conversations, more Sunday school and intergenerational things that we attempt to do. It doesn't exist. And you chuckle about it. And I'm not, and I think the bluntness causes you to chuckle, but of course you heard me say that, like, I'm on a 3-year term call. And if I've been in charge of most of these things, when you move down to one pastor, this isn't going to work. So, the things you see that you're engaged with in faith formation that you're like, I like that, or I want to see more of that. Come on, let's get engaged with this together. We're not trying to build a big programmatic ministry that needs
20 volunteers every single week. That's not who this church is, but there are a lot of great ways that we can be engaged in very relational and meaningful ways. And we're still trying to find the right mix of opportunities. We haven't hit our stride yet for sure, but there are things that are happening that we do see little pinpricks of light, little glimmers of hope. So if you are interested in getting engaged in faith formation events in the year of 2023, come find me, and let's plan and act together to make these events happen for your community, for your congregation. That's all I have to present there.
Mhm. Invitation and welcome has a team because we had volunteers that were working in that area, and is responding to the Bridge Builders report. But Connie, on your point, let's just start eating together now. They've already talked to Mission Endowment Fund to bring in a special convection countertop oven and have hot cinnamon rolls a month. And you might say, well, that's kind of dumb, but when I brought it up to Mission Investment, one of the people there had a teen child and said, we will be here and we will do it because my son loves hot cinnamon rolls. And it's just those, whether it's a pancake, whether it's a hot cinnamon roll, whether it's a cup of coffee, it's growing those ministry. It's having hosts on Sunday mornings. It's growing reconciling in Christ. It's having a concert for the community that is an LGBTQIA concert that is a fundraiser, which we're looking at for this spring. It's being part of STEP, and I know that that is community leadership, but the pastors are involved with the other pastors and have formed a coalition to help STEP with the development as they are in their building space and as they have these big needs. So we're aware of what's going on there, and we're trying to figure out ways to get people engaged, excited. How many of you like hot cinnamon rolls? And if you knew it was the third Sunday of the month, might invite somebody else along, or invite a child along, or we'll just give them to the neighbors. So we're looking at all of those things. It's not another program. It's a way for us to gather. And if you have ideas on how to gather or how to increase RIC, Reconciling in Christ, and yes, the flags are not back up out front, and that's because we made a choice that we're not going to put them up until we get the lifts that are going to put our new fans in, so we can get them up high enough where nobody can pull them down. The only thing they'll be able to do at them is shoot them, and hopefully that wouldn't happen. But every time we put them down lower, somebody vandalized them. So it's not that we're not going to put them back up, it's just we're waiting to put them back up so they're secure. So if you're wondering about some of those things. But invitation and welcome is active and is looking for ideas and creativity and people that know how to connect and people that care about other people. And Connie, you're technically part of this group, and we've you on because you've agreed to help with the artwork inside the congregation. And at some point we are putting the artwork back up. It's just the pandemic stopped everything, and that wasn't our main priority. But we heard that people are feeling adrift, and I know you. Yes, you have one piece, and we have all this beautiful art in here. And Joy, go look outside the office. Joy did that window that hasn't had anything in it for all of Vista's existence. Now has something in it. So we're doing it. It's just it takes engagement of all of you as well. Greeters. we're going to have hosts that will greet newcomers or anybody that's alone or anybody that looks lost. So they're changing the way that they're doing it, but if you would like greeters, we can put greeters back out there. We found that a lot of people are coming on Sunday morning feeling very alone and leaving very quickly. And we had hosts that recognized them right away. You'll notice me leaving when I preach and going to the back of the sanctuary or going and sitting. If there's a member that I see that's sitting by themselves, I'm going to go sit by them if they don't have community. So I've been moving around the church. That's what we need all of us to do, because greeting is an important part and has always been an important ministry, Roy, you're right. And we can put that back in, but it's not the connection. That it is a connection, yes. Okay. Then we hear you, and we'll put that here and find volunteers. As we have greeters, we're going to need for you to. Yeah. So it's those pieces that we've lost when we lost ushers, when we lost greeters. Those pieces need to be reconnected. So I hear you, Roy. And I will share that with the group. I don't know if anybody from that group is here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what Roy said. It doesn't have to be shaking hands. It has to be another person looking you in the eye and saying, "It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Is there anything you need?" So some of those things for re-engagement, thank you for that. We'll pass that on. So we're doing hosting, and then we'll do greeting as well. And we'll make it, I don't want to say bigger, but anything we can do for connection. If you see someone sitting by themselves, ask them if it's okay to sit with them. It's just that simple. We do have a mic. It's right here. Connie, do you want it?
I guess all I was thinking is Pastor mentioned my name and we were talking about invitation and welcome, and I was talking about getting some of the art back or dealing with it. And one piece of art that was very precious to me, I'm glad that's back. But is that invitation and welcome? I get confused.
They're sacred space. So
Sacred space?
Any place outside of the sanctuary. So artwork in anything that welcomes people into this place and where they come in and they know.
That's welcome, because this week I volunteered at Feeds My Starving Children, and I was informed that was faith formation. I was waiting for some kind of a service team or something, so I get confused on.
Oh, they all go together.
I just get confused.
Yeah.
I didn't think that art would be invitation and welcome.
It is. Because every new person that comes in the door, we want to feel enveloped and welcomed, and that's our space, that's our art. Anybody else want to? Okay. What is the next one? All right. Worship also has a team. You can't do worship without a team. We have a visionary team and we have a working team. The working team has been doing their work for how many years, Gail? And would like people to be involved in it. And so we had a lot of transition this year. Luke and Sarah left in February. That was a huge loss. And people stepped up. And then we created new positions and we did a new hire. The sanctuary continues to be remodeled. We have a board that is very easy to use but looked overwhelming that we'll continue to train people on. We will have 2 large fans, and if you look as you go out the church, the boxes for the fans are off to the right under the stairwell, and they have been delivered. And they have UV protection built into it. And as I said, when we get those big lifts, we'll go outside to put up the flags as well. So we've been very active. We're trying to listen to people, and we're trying to add things into the service. We are now doing Advent this year with Aldersgate, or Lent, with Aldersgate and Spirit of Christ. And so we'll have 3 faith communities this year, and that's something new. So if you want to be active in that group, if you have a heart for worship, if you have a heart for worship visioning, and for what people outside of this community are hungry for as well, and also those within the community. So just get involved, and we would love for that to grow as well. Anybody? Any questions? Dan? Do you want the mic? The handheld?
Justice and Community Partnerships, that team does exist. So, good job. It's, again, as we sort of build community partnerships, there's a lot that already happens in terms of service. There's a lot that already has happened. A lot of it was put on hold and hiatus for a couple years. And so part of the Justice and Community Partnership team's work is to discern how do we show up in the community. So we have a team that is meeting monthly to think about that, but also plan events, action steps for service and learning and being partnered with the community. Because as a congregation, we have to be invested in the community and let the community know that A, we care about how they're doing, B, that we are available to them. Easy things to sort of say and think about, much harder to communicate in enough and robust ways to make it happen. So you can see some of the work, some of the members of the Justice and Community Partnership team that have been meeting. Thank you to all the team members. We will be talking more in depth and sort of demonstrating and showing what Justice and Community Partnership does on the 19th of February as we continue to highlight, or as we begin to highlight those mission teams in worship, and hopefully then get engaged and provide clarity and scope to that work that goes on. So that is, be sure to read through all the reports, of course, but that is the work of the Justice and Community Partnership team. Next, we will be presenting some of the work that has come out of the Justice and Community Partnership team, specifically the Racial Justice Task Force, who have worked to draft a statement of racial justice and solidarity for the congregation. So I'd like to invite Judy forward to read that statement. Judy was one of the people, one of the congregation members that worked on this team. There are a variety of voices that helped draft this. Thank you for all those that came to listening sessions. So how this is going to work is Judy is going to read this as someone who helped and worked very hard to draft this very faithful language. And then we will be doing an affirmation of it. And I will invite the congregation at the end of this reading simply to say, Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Dan, for leading us in writing the statement. If you would like to read along with me, it's on page 24. Page 24 in the annual meeting book. As followers of Jesus Christ, we believe God loves all people, and all people are created in the image of God. The Holy Spirit guides us in transforming ourselves, our families, our church, and our communities. The love of Jesus Christ teaches us to walk with the marginalized and oppressed. The work of racial justice is a lifelong journey that transforms us in large and small ways, which impacts the larger community. Systemic racism has roots in our congregation and the Lutheran Church. As a community, we commit to listening to voices, experiences, and stories of people of color to inform the work for racial justice, learning the history of systemic racism in this country and the ways racism and white supremacy impact our lives personally and socially, continually educating ourselves on how to work for racial justice, working through our discomfort, learning about our biases, and becoming aware of our individual privileges, working for racial equity and dismantling white supremacist systems, acting in solidarity with movements of justice, being open to the ways this work will change us, our beliefs, and our commitments. Thank you.
The Assets and Building Mission Team is one of those teams that is not functioning. We have parts under it that are functioning. We have a property task force that keeps this building and these grounds to the best of our ability. We have a huge building. We have been gifted with so much as Vista, and we have an amazing neighborhood. So we have been very attentive to what is going on in our building and looking at what we need for the future of this building as a 60-year-old building. Gradually falls apart one piece at a time, and we're trying to get out in front of that so we don't have to replace the pipes after they've burst. So there is a ministry task force working on that. But assets in building is so much bigger than that. It's figuring out how to use the assets in the building we have in this place. It's what groups can we be in partnership with? How can we get a second source of income for this congregation so that we can put the money that we offer together towards God's mission and not just to the building, because the building and the staff are the two biggest parts of our budget. If you have a heart for development, if you have a heart for connecting with our neighbor, if you have a vision of how this building can be used in partnership for other people to do their work and I believe God's work in this place, join that Building and Assets Mission Team. But right now that has been on hiatus. Caleb Rollins left in July, and he was the one that was leading and going to lead that team, and we just never really got it off the ground. We were waiting for the Vandersall Collective to come in and give us a whole bunch of help and some information, and so now we're going forward with that. So it has been on hold. It can't be on hold as we move forward. We need to use all of this building to the glory of God as much as we can throughout the week. So if this is important to you, please join that mission team. Any questions on that mission team? Does it seem like a really big one? This is the hardest one, but maybe for the future of Vista, one of our most important ones. So we need for that to happen.
Well, thank you for Pastor Heidi and Pastor Dan for talking about the ministry teams that are at work here at Vista. I know these discussions will go forward into Bridge Builders, and one of the first things that we'll be talking about is sizing. As we change in size, we have a duty to ourselves to acknowledge what serves us best, and especially as we have Dan moving on in the near future, sometime later this year, down to one pastor, how do we as ministry teams support one pastor going forward? So these are some of the discussions that will be going forward into that Bridge Builder Task Force to help identify how we build a sustainable model of leadership and ministry teams and the work that we're doing here in being mindful to the assets that we have, the resources we are using, and financially, just how our future is looking. And we'll talk more about that in our accepting the 2022 financial reports and approving the 2023 budget. Now, John, are you speaking to any of that, or are we just here to accept it? Oh, sorry, I totally skipped over elections. There's an additional line there. Here, I thought I had such a good transition. So we're looking at the election of council members and the Mission Endowment Fund members before we move on to that. And that is going to be on page, well, it's a separate handout. Then we need the small one as well. May not. And while we're getting the papers out to everyone, just want to take a moment to thank some of the council members that had participated this past year in their gifts that they have and contributing time to our meetings and bringing their thoughts and opinions to help us do the work that we do here. Just a few people dropping off from council. We have Jana Faust, Sylvia Pogoff, John Carlotto, and Andrew Rather will be stepping down from their positions this year. And we just want to thank them for their time and contributions and the work that they do here. So, thank you. I will be continuing on working with the Bridge Builder Task Force, as well as doing IT editing video needs. John is going to be moving into an assistant position for Treasury. And so we'll still have some work going on, some transitions. I do. So as a nonprofit, we have to have 8 members on council going forward. We are looking at the positions with those on the election ballot down below. Please read the bold text for the executive committee positions. We have 2 open spots there. Or is it just the one? One open position, and 1 is optional. So we do have some positions open for those that have the space just for once a month meeting. We just appreciate your time on Zoom to talk about the current things that are moving on in this place. Please consider yourself for just being a member of that position. I'm considering being a member on it, just as even though there's a lot going on, I contribute wherever I can. And if that is just a temporary leave while I'm working on family, then that is what it is. But Heidi, for those that are being elected for council members, these are executive positions, correct? Okay, these are at large. All right. So we are looking to elect the following members onto council. We have Ed Morlant, if you could please stand, and Waldo Johnson, if you could please stand. Thank you for your time and offering yourselves into doing council this year. We appreciate the gifts that you bring to this place. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to them or myself and the pastors around council and joining it and what that contribution might mean. For those that are voting to vote people onto council, we are taking this ballot to mark those we're voting into council. So if you're voting for Ed and Waldo, we'll have to mark their names. And there is an open position at the bottom as well if you have someone that is in mind that you'd like to vote. I have a motion on the floor to accept the ballot as printed. Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. That is the vote. So with that, we have elected Ed and Waldo into council. Thank you so much. We still have the 1 open position for council, so please consider that. We are moving on to the Mission Endowment Fund Committee members that we're electing. This is a 3-year term. And we have Mike McLean and Debbie Olson with existing terms until 2024 and 2025 respectively. The council president and pastors are positions that participate in they don't participate in votes and decision making, but they are a member to observe the Mission Endowment and its work. So down below we have votes that we have a minimum of 3 members for the Mission Endowment that we have to participate in, and we have 2. So we have those down below are being, I have a motion on the floor to accept the ballot as printed. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. And our favorite time to discuss budget-related items. We welcome John onto the floor as your final time as treasurer. I have to slide it up.
Is this on? Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first item is the statement activity for the general fund for the year of 2022. My comments are listed at the bottom of page 27. I'm not going to go through each line item for you. But I will say we did a lot better than I thought we would do with respect to income. Although we had a shortfall with contributed receipts, of $4,000, that was more than offset by non-member contributions. And so we actually wound up in a pretty good place from a receipt standpoint. We didn't need to transfer as much money out of the legacy fund to cover our expenses as we thought we would have to do. The reason for that is that we had some resignations in the staff, and so that reduced the expenditure for salaries and the corresponding reduction of the legacy fund. With regard to expenditures, pretty much everything was below budget, and the reason for that was because people aren't doing anything. Hopefully that will change in 2023. But there were a lot of committees that had money authorized to be spent, but we didn't have the participation to create those expenditures. So hopefully, as we continue to recover from COVID, we will become more active and find the need to spend more money to advance our ministries. In the assets and building ministry, many of the expenses that they had budgeted were for projects that have been deferred for a period of time, and so they continue to defer them in 2022. Those expenditures are again budgeted for 2023, so we haven't lost them, they're just deferred. So we did better than we had thought we would do with regard to receipts, and we did better than we thought we would do with disbursements, so we did better than we thought we would do with our deficit. And instead of coming in almost $40,000 short, we only came in $12,000 short, which I think is a win. Any questions on activities for 22? Okay. Do we have to accept these?
Is this the budget, commission
No.
endowment, or just?
This is just results of 2022.
There's no motion to need to be accepted. This is just for your information.
Okay, legacy fund is on page 29. We started out the year with $500,000 in the bank and a note receivable for $150,000 for a total of $651,000. We ended up with $260,000 in the bank and a $150,000 note. The expenses are listed below the fund balance and activity title. The biggest one, of course, was out of the salary category, where we paid for the staffing positions. We also paid for the $5,000 down payment for the Vandersall Collective contract from that fund. And then our next largest expenditure was with respect to the sanctuary remodel, which is almost finished, not quite. And all total, we spent $234,000 from that fund. Late in 2021, the Finance Committee decided to try to generate more financial revenue by investing in some mutual funds. And I'm sure you know what happened to the mutual funds in 2022. So we lost $11,000 on paper with those investments. They haven't been cashed in yet, so we still have the potential for recovering that, but probably wasn't the greatest decision of our lives. So that's kind of where we sit, $410,000. The $150,000 note receivable is due in February. Common Bond has contacted us to ask if we want that paid back immediately or what the repayment terms are going to be, and so we're still undecided in that regard. there's not a question of collectability, it's just what the timing of that is going to be. So we shall see. Questions on the legacy fund? Okay. Mission Endowment Fund. This is kind of a complementary report to the last report that's on page 26 that Linda put together. As I said, 2022 wasn't real good from a financial results standpoint. Our net change in portfolio, which is basically how far our stocks dropped, was $76,000, which is nothing we had any control over. It's just reality. Again, that's all on paper. We haven't sold anything to make that loss a reality. So there is hope and anticipation of recovering that. But because of the fact that we did lose paper $76,000, we also restricted the amount that we paid out of the fund, and we only spent $3,500 from Mission Endowment in 2022. There were 3 grants that were authorized, one of them for STEP, one for Dinner at Your Door, and one for Our Savior's Homeless Shelter. The Our Savior's Homeless Shelter is not listed here because we have not yet spent any money for that. That money is going to be spent over the course of 2023. So in the Mission Endowment Fund, our balance started out as $351,000 with the combination of income, change in portfolio, and disbursements. We wound up with a balance of $282,000 at the end of 2022. Questions on that? I'm on a roll. Last one is the Community Contingency Fund, which is formerly the Stimulus Challenge Fund. This fund was started in 2021 when the stimulus checks were issued by the government. And during 2022, council voted to transfer $14,000 basically out of the legacy fund into this contingency fund for use within the community. So we started the year with $3,700 in the fund, transferred in $14,000, and we had 20 grants that we issued for a variety of needs, which brought the fund balance down to $12,800. Questions about that? This fund balance is available to anyone in the community that can demonstrate a need. The maximum amount of any individual grant is $250, I think. Sure.
So I'll just speak very briefly to this. As we continue to sort of build a new structure of being a congregation, this is work that is involved with community partnerships and justice. So what's been happening is way back during stimulus challenge, when it was still called that, and we were sort of more in a higher level of disruption, we were giving out money to mostly families that were referred to us through the St. Louis Park School District through their social workers. So that is where a lot of the referrals come from. As you know, we are near a bus stop, and we're just sort of in the community, so some of these folks just kind of come in. So the Justice and Community Partnership team, in work with the finance team and the council, has been thinking about how do we provide direct aid for people that walk into our church and say, hey, I need something. We have folks come in rifling through the clothing donation, just trying to find that stuff. You know, I mean, folks come with a lot of different needs. So as we continue to move forward, Justice and Community Partnerships, we'll be thinking about how to give shape to this fund. Again, it's not a ton of money, but a lot of times these folks are saying, you know, like, I need $100 to help me square up my bills this month. I need groceries, and I've already used my allotment at whatever emergency food program I can access. So that's a bit of story behind this, and we'll be continuing to work with that and provide scope and parameters around that as well. But it's just trying to be a contingency fund for the community, you know. So if your neighbor has a need, you try to respond, right? So, thank you.
Okay, unless there's any questions about last year's Community Contingency Fund. Okay, we'll move on to the Memorial Fund on page 33. Started out the year with $27,000. We had a number of memorials donated in the amount of $4,135. And we spent $300 to replace the screen in the gathering area. So our balance at the end of 2022 is a little over $30,000. And finally, I think you remember that the balance sheet on the Legacy Fund showed a $410,000 balance. This is how that balance is tentatively divided up for use. These numbers are fluid; they change kind of with the needs of the organization. But at the moment, this is how we expect that the fund will be used. And you'll notice that $150,000 hasn't really been allocated out. We'll wait till we get the cash in to decide how we're going to spend that. And that's just kind of an informational report. So that concludes my report for the 2022 results. Okay, for the moment we've all been waiting for the 2023 budget. Page 34. The results of the stewardship drive came up with a couple $100,000 of pledges. And for those people who didn't pledge, we hope that they will continue to give the same amount that they've given in the past. And so using that model, we're budgeting $275,000 of contributed support, which is about a little over $1,000 less than we received this year. A lot of people pledge the same amount that they pledged last year. That ain't going to continue to work, folks. If you can't increase your pledges, we can't continue to increase our ministries here. So if you're one of those people who pledged the same as last year, please rethink your commitment. In earned revenues, again, a little bit less than this year, a little bit less than this year, primarily because we had some extraordinary gifts that came in 2022, and I'm always nervous about budgeting miscellaneous income. This year, 2022, was a terrific year, and if we repeat it in 2023, that'd be great, but I really hate to count on that fact without knowing where it's coming from. Financial income, we're hoping we do better financial markets-wise in 23 than we did in 22. Special events facilities rental is pretty flat. We had some catch up with outside groups catching up for rent in 22, and I think that we'll not repeat that, obviously, because they've already caught up. So we're looking at about 14,000 in rents, and that special events is kind of flat. The special events line includes weddings and funerals. In the actual results, we don't budget weddings and funerals because we assume that the costs are going to offset the receipts. Although Emma Todd told me that there will be wedding receipts, for sure. Expenditures. The uncategorized expense was the removal of the stained glass window at the Prince of Peace location. That's not going to happen again. Everything else is pretty much budgeted according to the requests that came in from the ministries. So I don't know that I'm going to address each ministry individually because I don't know that much about them, but those are the requests we got, totaling $486,000. The personnel line does include a 3% raise for those staff people who have been here at least a year. I'm not sure anything else is well, as I said, the assets and building include some projects that have been deferred in the past. If we don't get the money in, they'll probably be deferred again. We'll see. And so we've got $397,000 total income, $486,000 total expenses budgeted. I thought a $38,000 deficit last year was bad. We're looking at an $89,000 deficit for 2023. The only difference between last year's deficit and this year's is that we have filed for with the government for a refund of $89,000. You might have heard some commercials on the TV or radio talking about obtaining tax refunds for wages paid to employees during the pandemic, and that's what this is. It covers about 7 quarters during the pandemic, and the consultants that we worked with to do the filing thought that we would probably be paid sometime around the middle of the year. The amount should be $89,000. We'll see if the government refunds the whole thing. To the extent that they don't, we're going to have to use money from either the legacy fund or some other source. But
point of clarification, John, did you say timing in that?
Yeah, the timing would be kind of mid-month, mid-year.
Mid-year, okay, thank you.
Is that we're thinking. But it kind of depends on the government's response to the refund. You may have had better or worse luck with your personal tax refunds, I don't know. So I would submit this budget for approval.
Do I have a motion? You have a motion on the floor to accept the 2023 budget. Do I have a second? Any further discussion on the 2023 budget?
Nobody wants to talk about my budget?
Well, I think you might have already addressed my only question, and I'm kind of privy to a lot of these discussions, but the increase in assets and building, just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yeah. As I said, there were a bunch of deferred projects that weren't done in 22, but are budgeted to be done in 23.
It's also an increase in heating costs and snow removal.
Yeah, that's true as well. No, it's not the road. To be honest with you, Barb, I don't know. Mark Enenge put the budget together, and it's just, to me, it's just a line item. It's special projects. But yeah, I forgot about the gas expense and the electricity expense. We have to budget for a harsh winter. If we don't get a harsh winter, we're not going to spend the money for utilities. And that kind of happened this year in 22, that we had budgeted, I think, 26,000, and we only wound up spending 20. But gas prices are going up. It could be a colder winter, so we have to make that provision in the budget and hope for the best. Okay. I have absolutely no idea. I mean, honest to God, I put this budget together, and I had the 89,000. I didn't really itemize it, but it was in the I think in the earned revenue section, and the council said, no, you really need to split it out so the congregation knows what's coming from where. So I redid it, and that's the way it came out. I was amazed. I think it's a sign from God.
It is a sign from God, and it's a miracle, but John also put it in that way so that we realize that if we hadn't gotten that miracle from God and that gift, we would have been in trouble. And that's why we really need to start looking at assets and building and how we can get earned revenue, or how we can, because as we look at our community, there's no way that we can increase or sustain unless we grow this community, and we can't tell God that what numbers we need, but we can put our intent out there. But it's also, we've always been given these gifts somehow, and John still has his hair.
The question on the floor is, does all accounting people decide to put font in such small size?
I would ask for you next year up it. I thought I remember what it was. I couldn't exactly hear what it was. Bit.
Yeah, I'd like to take a moment just to thank John for all your contributions as treasurer over the years. Without your leadership, and I appreciate you sticking on as an assistant to help guide the future leadership in that role.
Yes.
I call for the question.
And in classic fashion, John is ready to be done talking about finances. So all those in favor of accepting the 2023 budget? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Just getting back to our agenda here. Now's a good time to just check in, see how we're all feeling about the future, and any questions that we have on the top of our heads before we move out of this place today. If you have any questions for leadership that we can help to try to answer, and if we don't have the answers, we can at least go back and discuss and see how we can get you answers. Any further thoughts or questions that you may have at this time? How will we move forward and get more participation? Well, I hope that we will greet ourselves and get together more frequently here with the Bridge Builder Task Force. I hope that just naturally forming some times to eat together or some events to spend time with one another will bring together just what we have. You know, if we can start there and spend some time together and I know for one, I started working at home in October, and I certainly miss working with people. So I view this as my outlet of in-person relationships. And I hope that for those that are maybe feeling that lack of that relationship, interpersonal relationships, that this is a space that we can use for the time that we have. So I hope that we take advantage of that and just enjoy each other for the time we have. And as long as we can sustainably make this place function, we will do that. Until we, in the future, decide otherwise, we just get to enjoy ourselves until then. Any further questions that are on your minds, though, that we can help answer?
I have two comments to make briefly. Sorry. For anyone interested, we all know how wonderful this meeting is every year. There's absolutely no one watching this live on YouTube. Secondly, whenever I'm overwhelmed at home, my wife always tells me, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Well, we look forward to this next year together, and I will welcome Dan to the floor to close us with a devotional.
Well, as we move out into the future that God's preparing for us, into this year that is 2023, that feels more like the title of a science fiction movie. Sounds like it anyway, but it doesn't feel like it, because we are the church, and wherever we go, we move through this world as the church. The ways in which we have been called to move through the world have endured massive paradigm shift these last 3 years, and the paradigm continues to shift. But what remains central is the cross. As you heard in our reading from Corinthians, it is the cross of Christ. It's foolishness, except for those of us that are being saved. They're experiencing that liberating power, and then are called to go share that power, share that good news out in this world. So, be people of good faith, be people of hope, be people of courage, be people that go and share the gospel in the ways you are gifted to do so. Let us pray. Dear God, we give you thanks for the ability to gather in many ways as we have become accustomed to doing. Strengthen us to be a community that remembers our giftedness, that remembers that we are loved, and that remembers your call on our lives together, our lives as individuals. That call that sends us out to share good news. We pray this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today, and we'll be together soon. I move to, there's a motion on the floor to adjourn. Do I have a second? A resounding second. All those in favor? Aye. So moves. Mark, you have a question? Yeah. For the mission endowment? For mission endowment, though? Do we need to mission endowment collect because there's 3 on the ballot? Never mind. The voting sheets were done by affirmation. We do not need to collect them. Thank you.